Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. We were gathered around the table at a cozy little restaurant, the kind of place where candles flickered against the walls and glasses clinked with laughter. Our closest friends had come to toast the fact that our wedding was only weeks away. My fiancée, Emma, looked radiant, her hand resting on my arm as conversations flowed. She laughed louder than usual, telling stories, drawing attention the way she always did. I sat there, proud, certain I was living one of those perfect chapters people dream about. But in a single moment, that illusion cracked. Someone asked her if she ever had doubts about settling down so soon. She sipped her wine, smirked, and said, "I will never love him like I loved my ex." The words fell heavy, slicing through the laughter like a blade. She shrugged as if it was a harmless truth, then added, "Sometimes I regret leaving him for Jake. But it is what it is, right?" The room went silent, my chest tightened, and I felt every pair of eyes dart toward me. I forced a small smile, though my throat burned. I didn't answer. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I sat back, let the noise rise again as people awkwardly shifted the subject and stayed quiet. She thought I was just being calm, maybe even weak. What she didn't realize was that in that silence, I was making a decision that would change everything. That night, while Emma laughed with our friends, I excused myself and walked outside into the cool night air. The city hummed around me, distant traffic, snippets of conversations from strangers walking past. I breathed deeply, staring at the ring on my finger. The truth was, I had always wondered about the shadow of her ex. She had mentioned him before, never in detail, but always with that strange mix of bitterness and nostalgia. I ignored it, thinking time would heal, but hearing her say it out loud, in front of everyone, stripped away any illusions I'd been holding. When we got home, she acted like nothing happened. She brushed her hair, scrolled through her phone, talked about the seating arrangement for the wedding. I sat on the couch watching her, realizing just how much of my life I had wrapped around a person who couldn't even respect me in public. She never apologized for what she said. Maybe she thought I was too nice to react. Maybe she assumed I loved her so much I would let it slide. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask her what she meant. I simply went to bed with my mind racing. I thought about the vows we were supposed to exchange, the guests who would travel from far away, the pictures we'd hang on our walls. And all I could hear was her voice saying she regretted leaving him, that she'd never love me the same way. That wasn't a foundation, it was a house built on sand. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened the wedding planner spreadsheet. Names, numbers, deposits, vendors, it was all there. I started sending emails, calm, polite cancellations. Venues were informed, catering contracts were ended, photographers released. Money was lost, but peace was priceless. By the time she stepped out with a towel wrapped around her, sipping her coffee, I had already canceled half the wedding. She asked what I was doing. "Work," I said. And in a way, it was. Over the next week, I unraveled our future in silence. Invitations were retracted, hotel blocks released, flowers canceled. I didn't tell her. She went on with plans, meeting her bridesmaids, shopping for decorations, not realizing everything was collapsing behind her back. Each day, I felt lighter. I was no longer trapped in her narrative. I was writing my own. Finally, one evening, I sat her down. She smiled, probably expecting me to ask about color schemes or music playlists. Instead, I placed the ring box on the table between us. She frowned, confused. "What's this?" "I canceled the wedding," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "We're done." Her jaw dropped. "What are you talking about? You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, and I did. She laughed nervously, the way people do when they think it's a prank. "Jake, stop. Be serious." "I am serious," I said. "You told everyone at dinner that you'll never love me the way you loved him, that you regret choosing me. You said it like it was nothing. But it isn't nothing. I'm not going to marry someone who treats me like a consolation prize." Her face drained of color. "I was joking. You know I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that," I replied. And even if you didn't, it doesn't matter. Those words don't disappear. They live in my head now, and they always will. I deserve more than being compared to a ghost. She scrambled, tears forming, her voice pitching higher. You can't just throw everything away. We have people coming. Plans made. All canceled, I said. It's done. She stared at me, speechless, for once unable to spin the story. And in that silence I stood up, left the ring on the table, and walked out. The next few days were chaos. Her friends bombarded me with messages, some begging me to reconsider, others accusing me of being heartless. My family, though, supported me. They had seen the red flags, even if they hadn't said them out loud, and when I told them the truth, they understood. Emma tried calling, texting, even showing up at my door. She went from apologizing to lashing out, accusing me of humiliating her, of overreacting. But nothing moved me. I stayed calm, polite, distant. The wedding was off, and so was the relationship. What she didn't realize was that canceling the wedding wasn't just about her words that night. It was about reclaiming myself. I had been bending, compromising, ignoring my instincts for too long. Her sentence was just the final spark. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. The story spread. People whispered about why I had called it off. Some blamed me, but many respected me. Quietly, friends reached out to say they admired my strength, that they wished they'd had the courage to walk away from toxic relationships earlier in their lives. And as for Emma, she spiraled. Her ex didn't take her back. Her friends stopped defending her when they realized what she had said. She had mocked me, thinking she could keep me tethered while pining for someone else. Instead, she ended up alone, facing the fallout of her own words. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't in her pain, it was in my freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself or waiting for scraps of affection. I was building a life where I didn't have to compete with a memory. But that wasn't the end. What happened next, what nobody saw coming, was how I turned that moment into something far bigger than either of us could have imagined. The morning after I left the ring on the table and walked out, I woke to a strange silence. Not the heavy silence of a strained relationship, but the clean quiet of freedom. My phone buzzed endlessly with calls and texts from Emma. I didn't answer. Each vibration felt like an echo of the life I had already chosen to leave behind. By the end of the week, the news had spread through our circle of friends and family. Everyone knew the wedding was canceled. Some sent messages of support. Others whispered in judgment. But I didn't care. What mattered was that I had taken control of my story. For years, I had been the reliable one, the steady man who put her needs first. Now, I was the man who finally said no. Emma showed up at my apartment one evening, eyes red, makeup streaked, clutching her phone like it held her last chance. She stood at the door begging to talk. I let her in, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted clarity. She sat on the couch, twisting her hands nervously. I didn't mean it, she said quickly. It came out wrong. I was tipsy, trying to be funny. You know I love you. I looked at her calmly. You didn't stumble on those words. You said them clearly, without hesitation. You've probably thought them for years. Her lip trembled. Even if I did, that doesn't mean I don't want a life with you. People have pasts. People make mistakes. I leaned forward. It wasn't about your past. It was about your disrespect. You embarrassed me in front of our friends. You told them I'd never measure up. Do you know what it feels like to sit there while everyone laughs awkwardly, knowing the person you're about to marry still loves someone else? She shook her head, tears spilling. I'm sorry. Please, Jake, we can fix this. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. No, Emma, I don't want to fix something that was broken from the start. She hesitated, then walked past me, shoulders shaking. That was the last time I saw her face to face. The following months were both difficult and liberating. Difficult because walking away from someone you once thought was your future always hurts. Liberating because I felt like I had shed chains I didn't realize I was wearing. I focused on work, hobbies I'd abandoned, and rebuilding friendships that had faded while I tried to maintain Emma's demanding social life. Opportunities started opening unexpectedly. A colleague invited me to give a short talk at a professional event about resilience. I hesitated at first. I wasn't a public speaker, but something in me had shifted. I had faced humiliation, betrayal, and heartbreak, and I was still standing. If I could endure that, I could stand in front of a room. The night of the talk, my hands trembled, but my voice steadied as I spoke about choices, about refusing to stay where you aren't respected. The audience listened, then applauded. People approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of walking away from toxic relationships or careers. I realized I wasn't alone, and neither were they. That single talk led to another, then another. Soon, I was speaking regularly, not just about relationships, but about the broader idea of self-worth. Each time I stood on stage, I remembered the dinner where Emma mocked me, and I felt the contrast. Once I had been silent because I didn't want to cause a scene. Now my voice commanded entire rooms. Meanwhile, Emma's life unraveled. Mutual friends told me whispers of her trying to reconcile with her ex, only to be rejected. They said she grew bitter, resentful, blaming me for humiliating her when she had humiliated herself. Some nights I wondered if she regretted losing me, or if she only regretted losing the wedding she had dreamed of. But it didn't matter. Her opinion no longer defined me. The turning point came 6 months later when I was invited to give a keynote at a regional conference. Hundreds of people in the audience, lights blazing, cameras recording. I stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and told my story, not with names or bitterness, but with honesty. I spoke about the night when someone I loved told me I'd never be enough, how I had sat in silence, and how I had chosen to walk away with dignity instead of anger. The hall was silent as I finished. Then applause thundered, filling the room. People rose to their feet, and in that moment, I knew I had reclaimed everything Emma had tried to strip away from me. Afterward, as I mingled with attendees, a familiar face caught my eye near the back. One of Emma's close friends had been there, watching. She approached me, awe in her expression. "She was wrong about you," she said softly. "You're not boring. You're stronger than anyone I know." I smiled. I don't need her to be wrong anymore. I just needed to be right about myself. That night, I went home alone, but content. I didn't crave revenge in the form of her suffering. My revenge was my growth, my voice, my ability to stand tall where once I had been silent. Still, fate had one more twist. A month later, I was invited to speak at a charity gala in my own city. It was a high-profile event attended by business leaders, politicians, influencers. As I stood backstage preparing my notes, someone mentioned casually, "Your ex-fiancée is here. She came with friends." I paused, then smiled faintly. Of course she was. Life has a way of circling back. When I walked onto the stage and the spotlight hit, I didn't look for her. I focused on the hundreds of faces in front of me. I spoke about betrayal, about resilience, about how sometimes the greatest gift comes wrapped in pain. I shared how silence, once my weakness, had become my greatest strength. As the crowd rose in applause, I let my gaze sweep the room. For just a second, I saw her. Emma sat frozen, eyes wide, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Around her, people cheered for me. She didn't clap. She couldn't. And in that silence, I felt the closure I had been waiting for. But what happened after that gala, what nobody saw coming, would take everything to a level I hadn't imagined. After the gala, the messages flooded my inbox. People wanted to know more, wanted to book me for events, wanted me to tell the story again. It was surreal. Just months earlier, I'd been a man blindsided at dinner by the woman I thought I would marry. Now, I was the one people turned to for strength. I hadn't asked for this role, but life had pushed me into it. And I wasn't going to waste the chance. Emma stayed on the edges of my world like a shadow that refused to vanish. Mutual friends told me she had broken down after the gala. She hadn't expected to see me standing on a stage, commanding an audience that gave me the validation she once withheld. She had tried to mock me into smallness, but I had grown larger than she could imagine. She told some of them that she had only spoken those words at dinner, because she was drunk, because she didn't know how much they would hurt. But excuses can't rewrite the past. Every person she told knew the truth. She had underestimated me, and it had cost her everything. In the weeks after, she reached out again. A long email, pages of apologies and explanations, promises that she had changed. She said she missed me, that she realized now I had been the best thing in her life. I read it once, then closed it without replying. Sometimes the best answer is no answer at all. My life moved forward. I was invited to speak in different cities, each stage bigger than the last. The more I spoke, the more confident I became, and the less I thought about Emma. My story had started with her betrayal, but it no longer belonged to her. It belonged to me, and to everyone who listened and saw a reflection of their own struggles in my words. Still, the final chapter of this story wasn't written until almost a year later. By then, I had built a reputation, a following online, and a steady career as a speaker. I had moved into a new apartment that felt like home, filled with plants, books, and peace. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a national leadership summit. It was the biggest opportunity yet. Thousands in the audience, cameras broadcasting the event. The kind of stage that could cement everything I had worked toward. I accepted without hesitation. The night of the summit, the hall was massive, lit with dazzling chandeliers. Attendees filled the seats, buzzing with conversation. As I walked backstage, a staff member mentioned casually, "Looks like you've got some old connections here. I saw your ex-fiancée out in the lobby earlier." For a moment, I froze. Then I smiled. It didn't matter. She was just another face in a crowd of thousands now. When my turn came, I stepped into the light. The applause began before I even spoke, and when it quieted, I started with the story that had changed everything. I told them about the night at dinner, the words that had shattered my illusion, the silence I chose instead of confrontation, and the decision to walk away. I spoke about how the most painful moments can be the very ones that force us to grow. As I spoke, I felt the energy in the room shift. People leaned forward, eyes fixed on me. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was telling theirs too. Betrayal, doubt, the choice to leave behind what doesn't value you. Everyone had felt some version of it. And in that room, I wasn't a man abandoned by love. I was proof that you could rebuild, stronger than before. When I finished, the hall erupted. Thousands of people on their feet, clapping, cheering. The sound was overwhelming, but in the best way. I let my gaze sweep the crowd, not searching but acknowledging. And there, near the middle, I caught sight of her. Emma. She was standing too, but she wasn't clapping. She looked stunned, her face pale, her hands motionless at her sides. Around her, the entire audience cheered for me, but she couldn't move. In that moment, I saw the truth reflected in her eyes. She had finally understood. The man she once mocked had risen so far above her that she could no longer reach him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was peace. I had thought revenge would be the moment she realized what she lost, but standing there, I understood something deeper. Revenge wasn't the applause or her silence. Revenge was the life I had built after her, the happiness that no betrayal could take away. After the summit, people rushed to meet me. Photographs, handshakes, stories poured out from strangers who now felt like friends. I stayed late, listening to them, offering encouragement. Emma didn't approach me. She slipped out quietly, and for the first time I didn't care whether she left or stayed. She no longer had any power over me. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window looking out at the city lights. I thought about how far I had come in a year. From humiliation at a dinner table to commanding stages filled with thousands. From silence that felt like weakness to silence that became strength. From almost marrying someone who saw me as a backup plan to living a life where I was the main character of my own story. What happened next, nobody saw coming. I had canceled the wedding, but in doing so, I had created a life far better than the one we would have had together. People expected me to crumble, to chase her, to forgive or beg. Instead, I had built something greater. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but something far more lasting. I went to bed that night with a quiet smile. Not because I had beaten her, but because I had finally won myself.